On behalf of Bhavan Gandhi Sangrahalaya and Gandhi Smarak Nidhi Mumbai, a warm welcome to you, Dr. Shimon Lev, and to all of you friends. Dr. Shimon Lev is a well-known scholar, deeply interested in Gandhi's life and work. In fact, we were just now talking about his work, his passion for India, and his passion for Gandhi. It's amazing that how he has brought Gandhi in Hebrew language. He's received his PhD at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, Israel, and the topic of his thesis is also rather exciting. It is regarding the cultural and political encounter between Indians and the Jews in the context of the growth of their respective national movements. I mean, this is the perspective we usually neglect, but he has focused on this and brought it out very well in his thesis. And in fact, I was just requesting, I said, why don't you publish it in English? It will be so helpful for people like us. And his publications include, as we know, Soulmates, the story of Mahatma Gandhi and Hermann Kallenbach, and also a book in Hebrew, meaning, and who knows how to ask. It's in Hebrew. And he was also the academic editor of the Hebrew editions of Gandhiji's Satyagraha in South Africa and Hind Swaraj. And I'm very happy to share it with you that he has given both the books to us in our Bhavan library. We are very thankful to you, Dr. Lev. And Dr. Shimon is a scholar undoubtedly, but he's also a very creative person. So apart from being a researcher in Indian studies, he's an artist and a curator. And I think you have made some films also. And he has published widely and exhibited in numerous solo and group exhibitions. And now we are all eagerly waiting for your lecture, Dr. Shimon Lev, on the story of Mahatma Gandhi and Hermann Kallenbach. Thank you, please.
Thank you very much. We had a long discussion before the lecture, and I said I came to India, my first visit to India, it was after my army service. You know, in Israel there is 3 years compulsory service in the Israeli army, 2 years for women. And there's many other people I went to travel after this difficult army service. But the reason I came to India was very simple, because my elder brother went to South America. And obviously I did not want to follow him. So I came to India. And then somehow I studied photography, and then I started to revisit India as a tourist guide. So I've been in this place for many, many times as a tourist guide, you know, bringing groups, telling, you know, this is Gandhi House, you know, something like this, have a look, we have a local guide and thing like that. But this time I can say that this is my most exciting visit, and I'm really, really feel privileged to be here, and really, really excited about it. Another point to say before I start my lecture, that we were discussing, you know, Gandhi in Israel. You know, from the news you always hear that, you know, all the time armed conflicts and terror and thing like that. But as I told Usha, there is, like, Hind Swaraj was already now, less than in 5 months, it's going to be published, the 3rd edition. And and I, you know, always say that this is my small contribution. I don't know if book change or what change or not, but at least you can give your small contribution to the bookshelves, and somebody by chance, you know, find this book, something happened. But there is, next week there is going to start, I'm not involved in it, but there is kind of a big organization called Women Doing Peace. And they are going to march from all over part of the country to Jerusalem in demand for peace. And they are saying that they will sit before the government house until there will be some we now like you start again the negotiation or some kind of things. And one of them approached me just 2-3 months ago, and she asked me, I heard that you wrote about Gandhi. What? I told her, look, you have to look on Gandhi March. Because they knew something in very vogue, and they sent her some materials about the Gandhi March also in South Africa, in the, you know, the big march, and then obviously also the Salt March. So this is kind of, you never know this connection and how cross-culture things are going. And this is actually what I'm going to speak this afternoon. So I will speak some from the pages and some by heart. It's about 45 minutes, and after that, feel free to ask a question. Okay, I feel very privileged to have been invited here by Professor Usha Thakkar to speak before you today. I also want to thank Dr. Prabha Ravi Shankar for making the contact. Dr. Ravi Prabha Shankar and me share a common interest in researching Gandhi supporters in South Africa. I devoted many years of research for Gandhi supporters for this unique story of the deep friendships that existed between Gandhi and Hermann Kallenbach, two men who came from very different culture and backgrounds. Therefore, it's a great pleasure for me to participate in this special event of Gandhi Week here. Some years back, when I had just started my academic career, I wrote a series of articles for a popular geographical magazine in Israel about the Israeli Trail. It's a hiking trail that traverses the whole of Israel. You know, you can walk the whole country. While hiking the trail, I went to the cemetery near the Sea of the Galil to see the neglected and falling apart grave of Hermann Kallenbach, where his ashes was buried. I published a few lines about Kallenbach in one of the articles, somehow squeezing it because it didn't have any real connection to the Israeli Trail. Surprisingly, this promoted an invitation for Mrs. Isa Sarid, Kallenbach niece, to have a look at Kallenbach archive. The archive was located in a tiny room in a small apartment in Mount Carmel in Haifa. It's one of the the third biggest city in Israel. On the shelves were numerous files burying Gandhi names. It seems that one of the lesser known and missing chapters of Gandhi's early biography was just waiting for a researcher to take up the challenge. Discovering an archive like this might be the fantasy of any historian, but at that time I did not consider myself as a historian at all. It took me over 1 year until I was entrusted enough and given the permission to copy some documents from the archive, but it took another 5 years for me to complete my research. Still, even at the first visit to Kallenbach archive, I knew that the result should be a book, and this, as you know, this is the book which was published, Soulmates, the story of Mahatma Gandhi and Hermann Kallenbach. So I am here today to tell you a unique story, which is, in my opinion, is mostly an intimate, personal story, but it's also a story of historical and academic importance. The story is fascinating for yet another reason, as it illustrates the possibility that cross-cultural influences can have much greater outcomes, as was manifested in Gandhi's significant role in India and indeed the world history, but also in a lesser part by Kallenbach, which, because of his relation with Gandhi, became the major link or the most important link between the Zionist movement and the Indian national movement. There was kind of a effort to get some support from the Indian national movement, and Kallenbach was this link because of his contact to Gandhi. The story involves the disparate culture of Lithuania, Germany, South Africa, India, and Palestine, Israel. It involved a successful young architect named Hermann Kallenbach, and it involved an ambitious young Indian lawyer named Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, who at that time is perhaps unaware that he is in the process of becoming the future Mahatma, though the ambition is surely already there. Both of these young men were searching for their own identity and way of life as unwelcome ASEAN immigrants in a strange, remote land, South Africa. The story also involves Leo Tolstoy, the prophet of non-violence, who was the main criticizer of Western civilization of his time. It involved Hindus, Christians, Jews, Muslims, staunch Tolstoyan, Theosophists, and white racism. It also involved two ancient Asian nations, both in the process of national revival, both struggling for freedom in the age of the collapse of imperialism, but it also takes place during the most catastrophic period of the 20th century, the Second World War and the Holocaust. Gandhi on one hand, Hitler on the other hand, the two most famous figures of the time, but what a difference. And in between, there was Kallenbach, who was on one hand a believer in nonviolence as a disciple of Gandhi, but on the other hand, shared the fears of the fate of his Jewish brothers and especially his Jewish family, which were in Europe. I believe it's rare for a historian to come across such a story. Being more of an academic researcher myself, I will try my best in my time-limited speech not to destroy it with dry, boring academic facts and references, but on the other hand, I will try not to ignore the importance of this relationship in the broader historical perspective. The main point that must be emphasized at the beginning is that the relationship between Gandhi and Kallenbach was an important part of Gandhi's development during his formative years in South Africa. This fundamental point lies in the bottom of my research. I'm sure that you are all aware of the fact that it was during Gandhi's 21 years living in South Africa that he fully developed into the future Mahatma. All the components of his social religious doctrine were developed there before he returned to India as a promising young leader. So the roots of most of his activities and action as a key leader in the Indian struggle for independence were rooted in South African experiences. I think that most Gandhi researchers would agree with this. This fact alone gives us more than a hint about how significant the relationship between Gandhi and Kallenbach was. There is a big trend now, I think, and you can see it in many books, of really researching Gandhi's surrounding and supporters in South Africa. It took some years. Some scholars say because in the beginning, like the Indian national historian, they were mostly wanted to emphasize Gandhi role in the Indian struggle, but now there is, as you see, Ramgua, Gandhi before India, and there are so many works have been done now about Gandhi, the earlier Gandhi, and most of them based on this assumption that in order to understand Gandhi, you have to understand his formative years, which were in London and after that in South Africa. So I claim that one cannot understand Gandhi's process of development without studying his surrounding and his encounters with Indian and European supporters in South Africa. I believe that all of European supporters, Kallenbach was Gandhi's most intimate supporters, and this is why I called him soulmate. Kallenbach was the one who shared Gandhi's most inner feelings, fears, hopes, ambitions, sorrows, joys, and spiritual world. He is the one who also took a very active part in Gandhi's various spiritual, religious, and alternative lifestyle experiences. But apart from that, he also played a key role, along with some other supporters like Pollack and many others, in helping the Indian struggle in South Africa, which Gandhi led in many ways. Gandhi trusted Kallenbach and shared with him his spiritual and political journey, and Gandhi defined them both as spiritual rope walkers. But what makes the story of Kallenbach and Gandhi even more unique, as I said before, is that the relationship consisted of a second round, which took place during Kallenbach's Zionist mission in Gandhi in 1937. Kallenbach was asked by the Zionist leader and future Prime Minister of Israel, Moshe Sharet, to brief Gandhi on Zionism and try to get his support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. So Gandhi and Kallenbach relationship reverses the dramatic events of the first half of the 20th century and constitutes the main connection between the two national movements, as I said before. After this short introduction, I wish to expand on few matters. For fuller biography, as I said, you can, and always I find also some mistakes, you can have a look in the book. I mean, I won't be able to discuss the whole aspects, obviously. During the round table conference in London, Gandhi told the Jewish Chronicle reporter, and I quote, "I have a world of friends among the Jews. In South Africa, I was surrounded by Jews." And indeed, this was a unique phenomenon, as a few members of Gandhi's closest supporting circle were all Jews. One of them was Mr. Louis Rich, the founder of the Theosophical Johannesburg Lodge of the Theosophical Society. Another one was a merchant named Gabriel Isaac, a jewelry merchant. Other were the Fogels, one of whom invited Gandhi to the Seder, the Pesach of a Jewish festival, and also to the synagogue. Gandhi actually liked the matzah. It's like, I don't know if you know what is it, but it's like papadam. When you eat in this, he said it, the crispy matzah, but he found the prayers to be long and uninspiring. And this, nobody can blame him for that. There was, of course, Sonia Slezhin, his devoted Jewish secretary, who Kallenbach brought to work with Gandhi, and who was very highly praised by Gandhi in his two autobiographies and also by Gokhale. But the two men who constituted Gandhi's whole world were the English Jew Henry Pollack and Hermann Kallenbach. Their activities alongside Gandhi generated criticism that was hurled at Gandhi by his main Indian opponent, Iyer, and they were called Gandhi loyal prime ministers. One can describe Pollack as Gandhi's political supporter and Kallenbach as his intimate supporter. The encounter Gandhi had with the influential group in London called the Theosophical Society is well known. In South Africa, even though he distanced himself and refused to become a formal member of the society, the Theosophists were Gandhi's best recruiting ground for his European followers. Strangely enough, most of these Jewish supporters came from the Theosophical circle as well. As Jews, they were attracted to the Theosophical Society because of its universalist approach, inward searching, self-devising perfectionism, and non-orthodox opportunity to explore spiritual ideas. These Jews sought the universal dimension perhaps first in the occult and in the doctrine of Madame Blavatsky and Annie Besant, but after meeting Gandhi, they shifted their interest to the charismatic Indian lawyer. In order to understand the implication of the involvement of these Jews, one must also recognize their importance in the wider historical context of the later Jewish opposition to apartheid. Like, during the apartheid time, of course, there was a lot of white racism, but you can say that compared to the percent of the population, there were a lot of Jews were fighting against apartheid or supporting Mandela. And really, Mandela wrote, "In my experience, I have found Jews to be more broad-minded than most whites of issue of race and politics, perhaps because they themselves historically have been victims of racism." The foundation of what Mandela wrote was laid, in my opinion, by Rich, Kallenbach, Slezhin, and Pollack. But these individuals were actually acting in contrast to the main consensus of the Jewish community and leaders, and sometimes even against their own families. Kallenbach family, for example, regarded him as being caught under Gandhi's spell and also becoming crazy. So one can speak only about mostly textual encounter between Jewish and Indian culture during the age of Orientalism. I'm going back a little bit to the 19th century because what actually I claim that the first real meeting between Jews, of course there was a Jewish community here in India, but the real, which has influence later on, was actually the meeting with Gandhi in South Africa and also with Tagore by some of his, he invited Moritz Weintraub and Sylvian Levy, some scholar, to teach in Stantiniketan. But the real first encounter was personal encounter, and personal contacts happened in South Africa. But when we speak about the 19th century or the age of Orientalism, so we can speak mainly on textual encounter. Like Jewish intellectual has to react to the to the difference between Aryan and Semites. Like Germany and Europe define themselves as Aryans. after the famous discovery of John's of the relationship between Sanskrit and the European languages. And then the Jews suddenly lost their, it was like the inferior Semites and the exalted Aryans. So I'm not going to speak about this topic. It's very interesting and it's a big part of my research because India was a key player in this one because, like as I said, the Jewish intellectual has to react to the Aryan myth and for the definition of the, and this is why it's important because what we call the Jewish, there is the Orientalism, the famous Orientalism, but there is also what we call the Jewish Orientalism. Mainly that in India, the way they looked about the Zionist movement was a kind of a colonist one going under the British support. This was the key factor for objecting Zionism, Gandhi and Nehru and others. But for the Jews in Europe, it was much more complex because on one hand, when they talk about India, about the Orient, they were part of the Orientalist discourse by themselves. But on the other hand, they were considered by their surrounding as Asians. So, you know, it's like kind of, and this is a key thing in the development of the Zionist movement, because it's like, okay, we cannot assimilate or we cannot be accepted fully in Europe, so we have to go to our own ancient homeland. And this view was never really fully aware, was aware in India. But this, I'm not going to talk about it, but the main point is that, as I said, that the first meeting was, as I see, the first real meeting was between Gandhi and his Jewish friends. Of course, there are the Jewish Indian communities here in Bombay, Cochin, but, and it's a very important topic, and I don't want to offend anyone, but in my view, I would put it like this. I mean, one cannot speak about Christianity and Islam without speaking about Judaism, but one can speak about India without mentioning the Jews. There are, you know, it was microscopic communities. And it's very well a research area. But you look in a broader aspect, and this is one of the reasons why in India it also was difficult to understand the roots of the Zionist movement in Palestine, because there was not so much awareness to this historical, it's truly historical or not truly historical, I'm not coming to this subject, but at least to the Jewish claim about their historical roots in Palestine, in Eretz Israel. So I want to say a few words about Jews in South Africa. I mean, how the Jews came to South Africa and what's happened there. And maybe I will say it by heart. I mean, the Jews who came to South Africa, where they met the Indians, were actually fleeing racism in Tsarist Russia. This was the main reason to escape, to leave from Europe to South Africa. Some went to England, some went to America, some went to Palestine, the early one. But the people who came from East Europe to South Africa, the Jews, they were escaping racism. But once they landed on the shore of South Africa, they completely identified themselves with the white ruling society or elite. And immediately, most of them became racist by themselves. This is something that I always say, this is really something like, in perspective, it looks amazing, but this maybe it can happen to each one of us. You know, that's the point. It's not. I always say that I think in a way everybody is racist. It depends what he does with that and how he reacts to that. And another point, which I think that this exactly, and this is what I'm trying to say. This what actually it's emphasize the uniqueness and the courage of Kallenbach, Pollack's legend, because they operated or they were active against their family and against their community. The community consensus was, you know, each one has his own problem. Indians will fight for their rights. The Jews will fight for their rights. The rights, of course, nobody was thinking about the blacks. Everything, of course, in quotation marks. So, And this is the uniqueness of this story. And this is, I think it also shows the possibility of individuals to have a bigger outcomes and implication in many, many fields. So who was Hermann Kallenbach? Kallenbach's father, his name is Kalman Leib Kalmanovich. He was a young boys teacher, you know, a Jewish teacher school in a town in western Lithuania, barely 2 kilometers from the border. At that time it was Eastern Prussia. Kalmach and Rachel, his wife, decided to cross the border because of this racism about against the Jews, to cross the border with their 3 children, Janet, Samuel, and Herman, and settled in a village in Rusne. 2 years ago, I don't know if you know, but the Lithuanian government somehow looking for establishing, they look for a story which contact Lithuania and India, and then the embassy of Lithuania in Delhi decided this is a good story, and they did a joint sculpture. It was a big famous thing. It was all over the world of Kallenbach and Gandhi in Rusne, which is really, it was really surprising. I was invited there to give a lecture together with Tashur Gandhi. Anyway, in 1890, Hermann began to study architecture, and he continued to study his Royal School of Architecture in Stuttgart. After he finished, in the following year, when he passed the architecture exams, he immigrated to South Africa, where his 2 uncles were already successful merchants, and started to work immediately. After 3 days after arrival on South Africa, he started to work as architecture, and became very soon became a very successful one and quite rich. Neither Gandhi nor and Kallenbach correspondence provides much details about their first meeting. This was a fruitful encounter between two people from such different worlds, which seems implausible. Kallenbach and Gandhi probably met in 1003, maybe beginning I think 1003, as a professional encounter. One can describe this meeting as the most unlikely and surprising. They were approximately of the same age. Kallenbach was 32, Gandhi was 34, and both had gone in South Africa as immigrants. But the differences between them were great. On one hand, Kallenbach was Jewish, tall, white, secular, bachelor, a highly capable, fluent architect, a lover of wide variety of sport, theater, luxuries, and women, addicted to satisfying his personal passions, and obviously enjoying his status as member of the white ruling society. On the other hand, Gandhi was an ASEAN lawyer, ascetic, frugal, focused on religion, morality, and true family of men, but on the brink of starting a life of brahmacharya, and dedicated to a public mission of social religious reform of his community. Indeed, it perhaps precisely these differences that account for their mutual attraction and would come to form the basis for their unique relationship. In his autobiography, Gandhi described his astonishment at Kallenbach's hedonistic lifestyle, and I quote, "We met quite by accident. He was a friend of Mr. Khan, and as the latter had discovered deep down in him a vein of otherworldliness, he introduced him to me. When I came to know him, I was startled at his love of luxury and extravagance, but at our very first meeting, he asked searching questions concerning matters of religion. Our acquaintance soon ripened into a very close relationship, so much so that we thought alike, and he was convinced that he must carry out in his life the changes I was making in mine." The relationship between Gandhi and Kallenbach quickly developed into a personal friendship. Kallenbach began to participate in Indian protest meetings to support Gandhi financially and to visit Indians who were imprisoned in jail as a result of the struggle. Gandhi and Kallenbach began living together in 1007 or 1008, it's not clear. The two lived for nearly 1.5 years in Kallenbach's home in Johannesburg, the Karal. Today it's a kind of a guest house in Johannesburg, Satyagraha guest house, which was called it was Karal because due to the traditional African elements which was in the house. Later they shared in the isolated leaking tent in Mountain View near Johannesburg for 7 months. The time during which Gandhi and Kallenbach lived together in Johannesburg constitutes one of the less written periods about Gandhi life, and there is a lack, as I say, there is a lack of information about it. One of the interesting pieces of evidence related to these periods can be found in a letter sent by Kallenbach to his brother. He was attempting to explain the dramatic changes he was making in his life. This letter found in Kallenbach archive, and one can only imagine the anxiety of his Jewish family. After all, Kallenbach's new lifestyle, which was in accordance with the social moral principle of Tolstoy and Gandhi, as well as his decision to support the Indian struggle and to live with an Indian in far away with South Africa, must have perplexed Kallenbach's Jewish Burgunese family in Europe. For them, it looks like really, weird that somebody is living together. And I quote, it's very interesting, and you can see, I think, I told also Usha that I think, sorry, we are regular as researcher, we are looking usually in the complete works of Mahatma Gandhi. I mean, we always have Gandhi letters to the people. There was done a lot of research, but you always, many times we are missing why this letter was written, what other people thought about it, how other people described this period. And now I was for 3 days in Sabarmati Ashram, and I discussed with Tridip Shurun maybe to publish some kind of source book which relate to some other evidence to describe the events of this time. And this is one example for that. Mr. Gandhi, a dear friend of mine, whom I'm very much beholden, sits at the same table with me in the kitchen and writes, Mr. Gandhi lives with me for the last 3 months. For the last 5 weeks, we have no native servant, and therefore we are attending ourselves to all our work. We cook, bake, scrub, and clean the house and the yard. We polish our own shoes and work in the flower and the vegetable garden. We are leading a most unusual life which helps a person to develop independently and the person to become better. For the last 2 years, I have given up meat eating. For the last 18 months, I have given up my sex life. I have changed my daily life in order to simplify it, and I found out that in a very direction this change has helped me. Of course, I think you can understand between the lines also what I'm saying. Actually, there was complete understanding of the situation between Kallenbach and Gandhi in the last few years. In his second autobiography, Satyagraha in South Africa, Gandhi described that period with a sense of humor. He, Kallenbach, would be hard if I offered to pay my share of the household expenses, and he would plead that I was responsible for the considerable saving in his domestic economy, and this was indeed true. I mean, of course, Kallenbach reduced his expenses so much as actually Gandhi saved him a lot of money. The exciting, it was always I know there was this joke with the half joke in Ahmedabad that it cost a lot of money to keep Gandhi poor. The exciting part, which constitutes Kallenbach's most significant contribution to Gandhi development, was the purchase of Tolstoy Farm, as well as his deep involvement in establishing and running it. Gandhi understood that he was to establish a place for the group of Indians who were still willing to fight. This was a time of crisis since the Indian merchants stopped their financial support of the struggle. Kallenbach wrote, when they established the farm, Kallenbach wrote to Tolstoy. I have read many, Kallenbach was the first one to write to Tolstoy. I have read many of your works, and your teaching have impressed me deeply. Having made use of your name, I thought I owe you this explanation and may add a justification of having used this name, that it will make me endeavor to live up the ideas which you have so fearlessly given to the world. Gandhi himself, of course, wrote to Tolstoy the day after and described Kallenbach as a similitude of Tolstoy himself. And this is a very interesting point. I think that I have this assumption that Gandhi used Kallenbach as a kind of Tolstoy who's changing his life from a rich person and willing to live simple life, as an example for the Indian community around him in South Africa. Tolstoy, by the way, replied in a prophetic manner to Gandhi that the non-violent struggle in faraway South Africa was the most important one taking place in the world at that time. So, as I said, I think it's really impossible to ignore the similarity that Gandhi saw between Tolstoy's way of process and Kallenbach, of course, in the less important, but you can see the parallel between the two. Well, I think, probably most of you know about Tolstoy Farm, but this is also one thing that I still think, there were several articles about it, but I think it's a subject that still need also a book to be written about it. There is Professor James Hunt, famous Gandhi scholar, who started to work on that, but unfortunately he was not able to finish it. So it's impossible to overemphasize the importance of the cooperative experiment called Tolstoy Farm and its influence on the formulation of Gandhi's spiritual beliefs and social ideology. The farm was a laboratory for testing Gandhi's idea, and it enabled him to realize his methodologies in daily life. At Tolstoy Farm, Gandhi built his leadership facility, ability which was further developed during the final stage of the Indian struggle in South Africa, and obviously later in India. Gandhi wrote about Tolstoy Farm, "My faith and courage were at their highest in Tolstoy Farm. I have been praying to God to permit me to re-attain that height, but the prayer has not yet been heard." In 1011, the Satyagraha struggle was on hold, so Gandhi went to visit his family in Europe. And this is, I won't go into detail on this story, but Kallenbach went as kind of a pilgrimage. He didn't see his family for a long time. His Burgunese family, who was rich, quite well off, people living in Europe, in Germany, and some other. It was quite a big family, and it's very interesting because Kallenbach and Gandhi, they signed a contract before the. How much time do I have? Do I have more? Okay. Okay. So I'm okay. It's very interesting because Kallenbach and Gandhi signed kind of a law language contract. What is the purpose of this visit? And I will quote a little bit from that. Lower House, the nickname of Kallenbach, is to proceed to Europe on a sacred pilgrimage to the member of his family. Lower House is not to spend any money beyond necessary with befitting the position of a simple living poor farmer. Lower House should not look lustfully upon any woman. From the beginning of the visit, Kallenbach set about trying to convince his family to change their lifestyle according to the values that were now dear to him. And Gandhi wrote him, "You have made yourself an advertising agent for me. You compel people to like me where before they did not. I can only hope that I shall die as you think I am." And, it looks okay. So suddenly somebody is coming from South Africa with Gandhi's idea to some area in, Lithuania. Okay, so what? And trying to change that they eat more healthy life and so on. But this became a very big story. First because Kallenbach was tested very much in this trip, and there is a lot of interesting letter exchange, like because of his niece, younger niece, she was 14, he was 40, and it's not clear what happened there. And Kallenbach and Gandhi advised Gandhi to go back to South Africa. But these two nieces came to South Africa, and Hannah Lazar was the youngest one. She became Gandhian by herself, and she was the right hand of supporter of Kallenbach, and she divorced her husband, and even she consulted Gandhi about her divorce, and she even visited Warda in 1938. She stayed for 3 weeks in the ashram. She was supposed to stay much longer. She studied, especially for that, Swedish massage, to make massage to Gandhi. But unfortunately, Gandhi at that time refused that any woman will touch him. And she, for example, I have in my archive a diary of her visit in the Varda ashram, which was never published. She described a lot of interesting things about that time. So this meeting, this travel of Kallenbach to Europe had after that a lot of implication. I think the fact that Kallenbach archive came to Israel was because of that, because Hannah Lazar kept the archive. And she immigrated to Israel and brought the archive with that. The Satyagraha struggle in South Africa was renewed at the end of 1913. As you know, Kallenbach played a key role in supporting the Great March. After Gandhi and Pollock arrest, Kallenbach remained the only leader of the thousands of marchers until he too was arrested. Kallenbach, and this is another document, important document, Kallenbach wrote in prison a diary letter which consists about 17 pages, which describe the whole event from his perspective of view. There is some, and it's very interesting because there is also differences sometimes between what Gandhi wrote and what I, to understand exactly what's happened, you have to search like in many documents. So I will quote a little bit from his letter. The day of his arrest. The day of my arrest is to me the day of the Lord. It was about 7 p.m., a mild South African evening. The moon was just rising behind the historical Majuba Mountains when an elderly police officer approached me with a telegram in his hand. He saluted me and asked me to step aside with him for a moment. He told me that he had just received this telegram with the command for my arrest, and he much regretted being the one to carry out this duty. I confronted him, thanked him for the message, and then he continued. I remained alone, the heavy prison door closed, the loud rattling of the keys and the sound of the departing step of the warden were wonderful to my ear. There was now a strange silence. All the prisoners seemed to sleep soundly. In the meantime, also the soft light of the moon entered the courtyard. With all my heart, I sent up my prayers to God, thanking him that he had deemed me worthy of this experience in my life. To his disappointment, Kallenbach was only sentenced for 3 months without hard labor. At the end of the struggle in South Africa, Gandhi took Kallenbach to India with him, on the way to India, as his right arm. In the departure ceremony, Kallenbach was told, "Your name in the history of the great passive resistance movement will glitter in letters of gold." Gandhi placed his hand over Kallenbach's shoulders and said, "I carry out with me not my blood brother, but my European brother. Is not that sufficient earnest of what South Africa has given to me? And it is possible for me not to forget South Africa for a single moment?" During the cruise on the way to London, Gandhi and Kallenbach has a philosophical conversation about the fate of Kallenbach expensive binoculars. Do you know this story? Another story which developed to a kind of a myth. Gandhi argued that they were a luxury, that the possession was not in keeping with the ideal of simplicity, and that Kallenbach should get rid of them. Kallenbach said that they were useful for the long trip. You can look, you can watch. At the end of the argument, Gandhi tossed the 2 expensive binoculars into the ocean. According to the story, Kallenbach cried for the entire day. Unfortunately, the 2 men arrived in England on August 6, 2 days after the World War I was broken out. Gandhi efforts to obtain a visa to India for Kallenbach, who was a German citizen, failed because he was an enemy citizen. And Gandhi continued his journey to India with Kallenbach, books and boxes. In June 15, when Kallenbach was imprisoned in a detention camp for alien citizens, Gandhi took care to write to him once a week. But the correspondence stopped in 1917, and that's kind of a mysterious, and probably also some people asked me before about this. Kallenbach, after his release in the prisoner exchange, Kallenbach did not inform Gandhi of his release. He certainly did not attempt to join Gandhi in India as it was planned. He was supposed to be his right arm, right man in India, but he didn't make for 3 years any effort to contact Gandhi. One can say that it's because of the, difficult communication after the war, like, who knows. But I think there was some kind of psychological aspect in it, because in one hand, Gandhi was making his name in India. Kallenbach found himself penniless in Berlin, leaving all his business in South Africa, and probably his family told him, look, this is the result of your falling under Gandhi magic spell. And I'm sure in that situation, it was difficult for him to counter this argument. But this is not the end of the story. Kallenbach came back to South Africa in 21, became a rich architecture, and Gandhi discovered that Gandhi discovered that Kallenbach is still alive, and he wrote to him, "If I was free, I would have run down most decisively to meet you, hug you, and once more look you in the face. For me, you have risen from the dead. I had decided that you had left this little globe of ours. You cannot imagine the joy of the thought I may yet see you in flesh and mien, which begins to receive and which begin to receive your love letters." In another letter he wrote, "As I write, the whole of the old life rises before me, but I must restrain myself." And this is indeed an important point, because for Gandhi, and you can see it in some evidence in his writing, the Tolstoy Farm, the time in Tolstoy Farm were one of the most happiest and maybe important time in his life, and he always looked back. He writes, sometimes he writes that he was in Sabarmati, and then he writes, "I have no Polak, I have no Slezhin, I don't have these kind of supporters from South Africa." In 37, in 36, Moshe Sharet, the head of the Zionist political department in Palestine and the future prime minister of Israel, heard that Gandhi had a very close Jewish friend. He wrote Kallenbach a passionate letter asking him to go on a Zionist mission to India to try to change the Mahatma negative views of Zionism. He wrote, "You are in a unique position to help Zionism in a field where the resources of the Jewish people are so meagre as to be particularly non-existent." Kallenbach responds positively and traveled to Gandhi Ashram in Warda. First he came to a place near Bombay, I don't remember the name, and he described his entrance. "When the prayers were over, we all stood up, me too little with difficulty, having lost the habit of sitting on the floor. Bapu approached me, embraced me, and put the question, after how many years? Come to the light that I have a good look at you." He drew me into the room, took a lantern, and lit my face and head. Touching my head, he said, "Your hair had turned gray like mine. It's almost the old way of life that we have accepted, as if 23 years and all of the happiness which affected millions of people had not been in between." Kallenbach stayed in the ashram for 6 weeks and had a lot of discussion with Gandhi about Zionism, and Gandhi even wanted to mediate between it's a long chapter. I won't go into it, but obviously he was able to at least to build some more interest of Gandhi in this aspect. I think it also was part of Gandhi's ambition to still also to speak in the voice of the Muslim and not leave it just to the Muslim League. It's a whole, at that time already Jinnah and Gandhi, this was what we can call the Muslim prism which things were looked on. But another topic, Kallenbach came to visit again in 39, and that time already Hitler was in power. And this became, I published an article about Gandhi and the Holocaust, because the Holocaust, can serve as a kind of theoretical or kind of extreme test case to nonviolence. What do you do in such a cases where there is extreme evilness? This is the question. Gandhi, Gandhi stayed in his opinion also after he knew what's happened in the Holocaust, and it's very interesting. And this is again, it's a long issue. Because he said something, he said in Louis Fisher biography, he asked him about it, and he said, what do you want? I was, Gandhi advised the Jews to resist non-violently and to be willing to be massacred by all of them. And this actually, not this, but they were massacred, all of them, including my grandparents and the sister of my father. My father was the only survival from the family. They were living in Berlin. But then Gandhi said to Louis Fisher, what do you want? I was right. Anyway, they were killed by their millions, so at least they could resist non-violently. And this is, it's a very sensitive topic, because for us it's always difficult to understand what's happened, how my grandparents were told to go there. And I mean, I'm not going into this point, but it's a very interesting topic. And I think now there is a lot of publication also about it, because also with the terror attacks, which, these horrible terror attacks, what do you do? Can you deal with this non-violently or not? This is actually the main point behind that. But it's very interesting, because Gandhi was attacked on his famous declaration, but then he used Kallenbach as an example, and that's what he writes. I happen to have a Jewish friend living with me. He means Kallenbach, which was that time in Gandhi ashram. He has intellectual belief in non-violence, but he says he cannot pray for Hitler. I do not quarrel with him over his anger. He wants to be non-violent, but the suffering of fellow Jews is too much for him to bear. What is true of him is true of thousands of Jews who have no thought of even loving the enemy. With them, as with millions, revenge is sweet, to forgive is divine. Kallenbach died in March 1945 and gave all his money to the Zionist institution. And this is also something, because we all know that Gandhi objected Zionism, but it was Gandhi, this is the evidence, it was Gandhi who convinced Kallenbach to give his money to the Zionist organization. So there is kind of a gap between his objection, public objection, so for his private support. He also, because Kallenbach was, he wanted to live as a poor farmer according to the Gandhi ideals, and he was planning to live as a farmer in kibbutz, the cooperative agriculture villages in Israel, which they were very cooperative. So, and Gandhi supported this. Yeah, you can see it in the book. There are many letters there are some letters discussing it. So, but this can give that there is a gap, or there is a mysterious gap between the public opinion and Gandhi private supporting of, let's say, the private Zionism of Hermann Kallenbach. Yeah, so maybe just to summarize it, I think this is, part of the story, but for me, this always when I look on this story in a broader approach, I think first there is, as I said in the beginning, there is sometimes can be very interesting cross-culture implications and outcomes which we never know. So we can think about Tolstoy, Gandhi, the meeting in remote South Africa, which after that has implication, at least from I know that I would say it like this: for the Indians' independence struggle, the Zionist effort in India was not that important, but from the Zionist movement, it was quite important. So I mean, so this is so always there are two sides for that. But for me, I think this is always the lesson from this story. I would say that individuals, it's not so much about what sometimes the public or how, as I said, for me, as I see it, I don't speak about any one of you, but I always say that everyone is a racist, might be a racist, But the question, it's what individuals do. And this can give, and I think the example of Gandhi and Kallenbach, it's a good example what individual, Gandhi obviously, but also Kallenbach, which was acting against his community and family, they can have a lot of achievements and outcome. Thank you very much.
We can have some questions, comments.
If I knew I would speak in honest,
I think Gandhi was a very complex character, and while some of his principles he just followed like a straight line, on some it was a zigzag. Recently there have been some articles, I think in South Africa probably, there has been some opposition, I think in Norway probably, to put up his statue, saying that in his initial years in South Africa, Gandhiji had a racist attitude towards the black population there. So, how would you look at it?
you know, this is a, I mean, it's excellent, and you know, you have it also in India, for Arundhati Roy and her publication, The Saint and the Doctor, or the works of Ambedkar. It's like also in Israel, it became like when she published her book, Gandhi didn't really wanted to abolish completely the untouchability, just to put them into the frame. And the same, and Swam, there is a famous book she wrote, a very famous work about Gandhi in South Africa, and then claiming that he was not making a struggle for the right of the blacks, you know. And this is like so. So I think my answer always like this, and I think I'm not the only one who says it. I mean, that this is example, and it's happened many times when we judge things in our daily, our own days terminology of things of the past. I mean, 120 years ago, nobody could work. I mean, to work on the rights of the blacks in South Africa at that time would be a political suicide. It was out of the question. It was out of the question. It's like nobody would take him seriously. He would not achieve anything. This is one thing. And in regard to the untouchability, I am not an expert about this subject, but I would say that from outside I can say that maybe this is also maybe more complicated matter because it's more up to date, but I think also in trying to represent all India, Gandhi had to go in between many currents, and he had some other priority. I mean, but this is really, I'm not an expert about this, it's a very interesting subject. But I think in South Africa, it's true that Gandhi represented the Indian community, but I would say it and this is exactly what also I said, I blame the Jews being racist, but that's why I'm saying that everyone, I don't think that really everyone is really a racist. But that's maybe you misunderstood me. I mean, it's not. I hope I am not a racist. I hope nobody is a racist. But there is a difference between, you know, keeping your community interest and to each one of us there is an other. You know, and it's very difficult to get rid of it. And I think Gandhi is kind of extreme one. In this, but also for the Jewish, like I criticize the Jewish community, but they also they also faced immigration problem. There is a very interesting parallel between the struggle in South Africa when it was like the Jewish leaders thought that Yiddish, which was that time kind of, will be considered as European language, because the government tried to stop the Asiatic invention by the languages and by culture. So in a way you can say like this, that the Jews were fighting not to be treated as the Indians, and the Indians were fighting not to be treated as the blacks. So it's always kind of a gradual thing. But I really think that this is a really misunderstanding of the situation to fight for the black at that time in South Africa. It was out of question. I mean, it's and another thing, for example, and when you check and when you test Gandhi's personal attitude, it was much more positive. He gave, for example, land to a black family in Tolstoy Farm. Nobody, or as I quote from the letter, you can imagine living in South Africa, polishing your shoes alone, and not a black servant doing it. It was, you had to be crazy. It was so. I think this is my answer for that.
Thank you, Dr. Shimon, for a very interesting lecture and opening up a new topic for many of us. I just want to ask you that I myself is working on Gandhi and Pollock, as you know very well. I also, Kallenbach was his very close friend. And of course, there were other Jews also. I would like to ask you that whether there was any competition among the Jews to grab the attention of Gandhi. That is number one question. The second one is, you said about that incident, binocular, which was thrown by Kallenbach into the ocean. Sorry? Yeah, I know that, but I'm asking, how was it possible in front of Gandhi to do this? No, that's what I'm asking. How could this happen? Because Gandhi's value for money is so important, Thank you.
What was the first question?
Was there any competition among Jews to grab the attention of Gandhi?
Well, I mean, if you will read Gandhi two autobiographies, you see that first I will start with Sonia Slezhin, because she was, if Gandhi even one time slapped her, but on the other hand, he admired her. Like, she handled the whole campaign when he was in jail, and and all the Indian leaders were really afraid of her because she had any fear to say what she thinks about them in the face. And Gandhi many times had after that to set up the things rightly. But on the other hand, she was really kind of advanced of her time, very feminist, and she started to work when she was 16. So she was out because she was she was out of this competition because she was really independent, and she did it from her own wish. She refused to get an increase in the salary from Gandhi. It's a very interesting story. There is a biography was written about by George Paxton. I think we're in a good contact. I think it could be, there is more into it. But obviously there was a competition between Gandhi and between Pollock and Kallenbach on the attention of Gandhi. There was a competition. You can see it. You will see it also in the letters that I gave you. There was a big famous incident with Mehta, which after that, because Mehta didn't trust so much the European supporters from his experience in Rangoon, in Burma, he didn't like so much after that he changed, and there was an incident between Gandhi and Pollock, Kallenbach and Pollock were together with Mehta, and the meeting was exploded. There is a lot of, surely there was, but on the other hand, there was a lot of respect. This, I think, and this, the division between that, Pollock was a very, let's say, more than Kallenbach, was much more independent. He was not afraid to say what he thinks. He was not afraid to argue with Gandhi when he disagreed with him. And Kallenbach was more like, as I said, much more intimate and intimate friend. It's kind of spiritual. you can say that Kallenbach was his key role in development of Gandhi being kind of reflective. Like through him, Gandhi could experience a lot of and test himself, and had some kind of support to try and to do things. So, but there, obviously there was a competition. The second thing, when Kallenbach came to India in '37, Mahadev Desai interviewed him about this incident. So first there is a different, like for example, Gandhi write that he's through one pair. And one of them, but the question was, because Mahadev Desai and Kallenbach said no, he threw both of the pairs. He had two binoculars, so okay, you throw one. But then you keep, and then even Mahadev Desai could not understand this. Like why Gandhi decided to throw the two binoculars, and they were expensive. There was also this famous story with the car. When Gandhi was released from jail, Kallenbach came to pick him up with his new car. And that time, in 1911, a car was a big thing. And after several months in jail, Gandhi was entering the car, and he refused to say any word. And then when they reached home, he told the Kallenbach, the only thing you can do, you can lit up and burn the car. And like after, he comes to meet him, take him out from jail, and they sit silently all the drive, and then he said, you should burn up the car. Kallenbach convinced Gandhi that it was too expensive to burn it, but it remained in the garage. And after that, for 11 years, Kallenbach didn't have a car because of Gandhi. Gandhi called the cars monsters. I think everyone in driving now in Mumbai can agree with that.
Can I ask a question out of the subject?
Yeah, if I can answer.
Yeah, I'm sure you can answer. I want to know how far the peace activists like yourself are influencing the Israeli government vis-a-vis the policies of Israel and Palestine. Have you been able to talk to the government of Israel to be reasonable and give freedom and a separate state to Palestine?
Well, I can answer only from my own personal point of view, not as a representative, nor the government, nor the activist. I mean, as I said, as being a scholar, I always say that I'm trying to contribute through giving the option to hear other voices, more broader voices, like publishing Gandhi in Hebrew. Hinswaraj was published now, and so on. But I want to say one thing. I think that at least the society or my surroundings, I mean, and I have family, some of them living in the settlements in the West Bank, I'm coming for it's like, it's a big family now, and so some are right-wing, some are left-wing, it's like a complicated thing. But I believe, and I analyze it, that at least half of the population in Israel everybody understands that it should be kind of Palestinian state. I don't think that anyone thinks that it won't be. There is a lot of political and conflict, and this is why I say there is a lot. Maybe people are not aware of it, but there is a lot of activity. I told someone, like, I think in Wada, there is, for example, there is for the last 30 years, there is a group of women standing every Friday in the center of Jerusalem. It's called Women in Black, standing silently with signs, stop the occupation. Some people hold them, curse them, some people support. It's like, and it's going for many, many years. There are a lot of, I mean, let's do it like this. Compared to our country, surrounding countries in Israel, there is much more activity toward peace than I think in the other countries around us. That's for sure. It doesn't mean that it will be. We have politicians. We have I'm not going into the Indian politics, but I think Modi and Netanyahu is quite a twin, you know. Somehow, yeah, I don't know. I think it's coming to. I mean, but it's very, you know, there is just. I will use this opportunity just to say that in my broader research now, I did a lot with the political encounter, and when you see. You know, for 40 years, there was no diplomatic relationship between India and Israel. There was, you know, and this is, as I said in the beginning, it's two-side, let's say, it's two-side, sometimes rhetorical, but like India was the only democratic country not to recognize Israel in the UN resolution. Recognizing Israel, and this is kind of it was a big failure for many sides, and you can see now how the relationship are improving all the time, and you can understand what it was missing for the last 40 years. And this is because of various reasons, because Gandhi and Nehru are key players, and also but not just to say that India is to be blamed for that, also the Israeli side or the Zionist side, you know, they also played the double game. Because on the one hand, they were saying we want independence, we are against colonialism, because on the other hand, but they needed the support of the British until at least the late 30s, 40s, after there was not a majority, and so on one hand, they spoke about supporting freedom from colonialism and imperialism, but on the other hand, nobody could officially really support the Indian struggle. So in this way, the Indian leaders were right, saying, how do you speak that you are Asian, but you're actually looking for the support of the British. You are not fighting really imperialism. So there is a very complicated two-sided for that. Professor Kumaraswamy from JNU said always that each side, like the Indian and the Jewish one, could not really act differently in terms of real politics. Gandhi, I think, one of his main and I think most important, not most, but one of his main, I think, idea, which is, it's like, it's exactly going against real politics, like not separating ethics and politics, which we are usually do, like as Max Weber once said, like somebody respond to Max Weber famous lecture about it, and say like actually Max Weber is saying that politics has their own conscience, a different conscience, and then different morality from normal people.
Yeah, I think that she wanted to ask a question, and that would be the last.
So can I just?
Yeah.
Okay, it's okay.
Take the mic.
Is there any record of any conversation between Kasturba Gandhi and Kallenbach?
Well, there is no recorded conversation there, but there are many references. On one hand, Gandhi was sometimes complaining on Kasturba to Kallenbach, but on the other hand, there was a lot of very, like, in a way, Kallenbach considered Kasturba like his mother, or like his auntie. There is a lot of references for that. It's very interesting. Yeah, it's something that's maybe should be looked more deeply to that. Yeah.
My question was the same, the invisibility of woman. So is there any reference to her in this friendship between Gandhi?
Yeah, there are many. No, I mean, not many, but there are for sure. Yeah, and Kallenbach, first, you know, three of them sailed together when they were leaving to South Africa, to London, and there was a lot of Gandhi write about it. There are. Sometimes there is, as you know, Kallenbach was kind of his intimate and confident man. So Gandhi was complaining about his kids, and Kallenbach played a major key role in trying to bring back Harilal, who was escaping from Gandhi on the way to India. So it was Kallenbach who was sent to bring him. This part is people are not aware, but Kallenbach was like kind of the uncle of Gandhi kids, and when there were crises, it was usually Kallenbach who has to deal with these crises, and there were many crises.
So these books of Kallenbach, where are they today in Israel? Are they in a library or are they with you or in supplementary working? No,
What?
all these books from where you made your research, which is a collection of Nazar, where are they today?
This is a very interesting story. I mean, I have some personal contact to it. But, the government of after I was toward the end of completing my research, it's the archive. Books. It's another question. The Kallenbach archive, the Kallenbach paper. There were this in a house in Haifa. And after a few, and it was sold, it was smuggled out, because it's against the law in a way, but it was smuggled out to England, and it was offered on a public auction by Sotheby's. And 2 days before the formal selling, they demanded quite a huge sum, and I was a bit. This I'm saying it personally. I was a bit. I even wrote Sotheby's that because they published it, that nobody was searching it, and nobody. This is documented. They were really mixed because Gandhi letters to Kallenbach were sold already in the 80s, and it was published in 96 volume. Supplementary volume number 6. So these were a lot of Sotheby's did a lot of not exactly accurate information because they got the information from the son of Isa Sarin, and obviously they wanted to show it as something that any scholar ever researched and so on to get a higher price. But and there were negotiations. I brought. When Ramgua visited Israel, we did a panel together, and I took him to Kallenbach archive, and this is how we started the process of the interest of the Indian government in this paper, because we brought also at that time the Indian ambassador in Israel, and but anyway, they didn't agree on the price, so the family sent it to England, actually the son, but then the Indian government had no chance, and they bought it in $1,200,000. It was sold. I'm a bit, I was. I think I'm very happy that it came to India. I think this is the right place. I think some of the documents should be copied and also kept in Israeli archive, especially regarding the Zionist, and it's also interest of Israel. It's kind of in scholar. So I have a lot of through the years. I did a lot of copies, but not all. Of course, there is and I think also, there were, for example, there was also some objects, like he had these two mobile charka that Kallenbach brought from India, a lot of clothes, the photograph of Tolstoy Farm. There was a glass place. There were the originals. There was a lot of very, very important documents regarding South Africa time. So I think this is the right place is India, but some of these I think should be. I hope it's you can access it in the national. Now it's in the National Archive in Delhi. So yeah.
On behalf of Bhavan Gandhi Sangrahalaya and Gandhi Smarak Nidhi Mumbai, I thank Dr. Shimon for such a memorable lecture. It was a pleasure to listen to you. Your presentation has shown us that Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy is relevant in diverse societies, and we need to know more about Mahatma Gandhi's life and work. A big thank you to you again, and many thanks to our dear friends for being with us here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.